If you are saving for a down payment to buy a home, you may be able to drop your savings goal from 20% to less than 5%. Ameris Bank offers a wide variety of loan solutions with low and no down payment options. With a quick consultation, the man, the myth, Stuart Wingo, loan officer at Ameris Bank, can help you determine which option best fits your financial needs and gets you into your dream home. If you're looking for a variety of products, competitive rates, and exceptional service, call Stuart Wingo at 803-319-1777. You can also check them out online, amerisbank.com/Stuart Wingo. Save thousands of dollars today by simply calling Stuart Wingo at 803-319-1777. You'll be glad that you did. Welcome to a, dare I say, special installment of JC and Morgan. He is JC Shurburtt of the Big Spur of 24/7 Sports. And world-renowned thespian that was performed many great acting stints off Broadway, if you will. I am Mike Morgan of ESPN, SEC Network, and I haven't acted, but I'd like to. I'd like to do something someday, maybe on stage. Maybe it's like a really, really low income, low budget. And maybe like 7 people show up, but I could at least add it to the resume. We welcome you to, I say somewhat special. It's number 150, JC. Did you know that? This is the big 150 of our podcast. So we don't have balloons. We don't have fireworks. We don't have circus clowns because mainly I'm fearful of circus clowns. But kudos in order to the great staff, all the people that have, helped us over the years, all the interns and segment producers and directors. And no, in all seriousness, it's pretty much been just me and you for this time. And we've managed to carve out a pretty good following that continues to grow. And now for the second straight podcast, we also have the benefit of having an actual producer help us out. We'll hear from Michael Haney later on. Speaking a man of many trades, but how are you doing? How's life in Chi-Town? You haven't hit a full winter yet, right?
Nah, not yet. It's getting colder, but doing well. Interesting time in college football right now when, I'm sitting there wondering what the heck the playoff committee's doing when they rank. And then I remind myself it really doesn't matter because things are going to take care of themselves. And there's all this outrage and stuff. And I'm sort of scratching my head, but I'm not outraged. I'm wondering who's going to get the LSU job. I'm wondering who's going to get the TCU job. The Virginia Tech job is now open. So the coaching carousel is starting to spin. And it was posed to me today. I was on the radio in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, like I am every Wednesday. And it was said, is the early signing date good for college football? And initially, I always kind of thought, yeah, get them signed early. It takes away from, you can get ahead in January by doing it, whatever. But the more I think about it, because the host of the show said he was for an August signing period. And I think I was too, but I was fine with December. Now I'm like, that probably needs to happen because, man, these guys are getting fired and being shown the door. And the idea is we need to get somebody in here that can recruit. But reality is most people you're going to try to get in there are already coaching somewhere. And so I don't even know that it helps other than you're throwing your program into chaos and firing people. I'm not going to say too early because the writing's on the wall, but I would call it unnecessary chaos, but I know we're going to talk about that. That's just kind of been on my mind this week.
Yeah, that's on the Hot Haney 5, as a matter of fact.
The early signing period good for the sport all the way around? And I don't know the answer. But other than that, yeah, really good weekend. This is the third straight year, I think, that we've avoided SoCon Saturday in the SEC because there are some SEC matchups. It's not great. But it's not like a list of the Mercers and Georgia Southerns of the world or whatever.
Hey, don't you knock SoCon Saturday. I'm a part of that coverage with number one Georgia battling Charleston Southern. On any given Saturday, JC, do not count out Charleston Southern.
The Buccaneers, Tony Alford Former Notre Dame running backs, the head coach there at Charleston Southern. Jamie Chadwell at Coastal used to be the coach of Charleston Southern.
You mean
and it
Denson?
used to be called, here's some trivia, the Baptist College of Charleston is what it used to be called before it changed names to Charleston Southern.
I did not know that. Autry
Baptist
Denson.
College. Yeah.
Autry Denson, is who you meant on the head coach.
Oh, Tony Alford's at Ohio State or somewhere else. Yeah, my bad. Sorry, Autry.
That's all right. Autry's the all-time leading Notre Dame rusher. In fact, he and Kirby were contemporaries, both played at their respective schools around the same time. That game itself won't get a whole lot of attention on the podcast, although I am amazed just sitting and looking at the depth chart, and you count all the 4- and 5-star guys and guys from California, guys from Vegas, guys from Texas, guys from all corners of America that decided to go to Georgia. And that's how they built that machine. And to Kirby's credit, I will say this. I wouldn't say he's self-deprecating, but he will come right out and tell you, even if it's a subtle dig at Dan Mullen in the process, great players make brilliant coaches, not the other way around. And they've just out-recruited everybody not named Alabama. And that is how they've gotten to this point. As you pointed out in our discussion before we came on, then they find some diamonds in the rough, like a Jordan Davis, who a lot of people thought was too heavy, or maybe an offensive lineman didn't fit the part. And then you get a Stetson Bennett who's a walk-on, and you make a decision that it's not even popular with Georgia fans. And you just say, yeah, I know he looks like an accountant. I know he has the name of a guy that plays at Bushwood with Judge Smells. And I know he's not big, but he's our best guy that gives us the best chance of winning. So you have a few of those diamond in the rough stories, but for the most part, it's just stud after stud after stud, NFL guy after NFL guy after NFL guy. Speaking of NFL, so I'm on the left coast this past weekend. I was calling Chargers Vikings. And first off, SoFi Stadium is ridiculous. 10 years ago, I was at the Super Bowl in Dallas, at Jerry World, and that is a phenomenal venue. I'm not taking away anything from it. And it is bigger. Well, it's in Texas, so it's got to be bigger, right? It's bigger than SoFi. SoFi sits about 70,000 people. SoFi is about 2.5 miles from LAX, right across the street from the old Los Angeles Forum where the Lakers used to entertain the masses. But I've never seen anything like this. This $5 billion goes a long, long way. And the National College Football Playoff, the championship game, will be there next year. If you've got a chance to go, if your team is in it, I know tickets will be expensive. I know it costs a lot of money to get out there. Oh, boy, but it is one hell of a venue. And, of course, the weather is 85 and sunny and perfect. And, as much as certain people try to ruin the great state of California, this beautiful piece of land and everything else, gosh, there's a lot going for that part of the country. And it got me to thinking, JC, because we always hear about the Pac-12 and colleges on the left coast. It's such a disadvantage to play in that time zone, right? 3 hours earlier, because if you play it, excuse me, I don't know where this is coming from. I get choked up when I talk about the left coast. When you play 3 hours earlier than everybody else, you're either really late when a lot of people are sleeping, probably not us, but like normal people with normal jobs that don't necessarily stay up till 1 a.m. watching Pac-12 after dark. Or they tried the gimmick of kicking games off 9 a.m. locally, which is noon West Coast time. And that still is a thing. I mean, that's Fox's signature game, right? It's Fox college football at noon. So the disadvantages we always hear about, but I got to tell you, like, as a sports fan, to be able to wake up in the morning and you don't really have to wait long at all for the games to get started, man. 9 a.m. and they're kicking it off. And then like the night game, and some people are like, well, it's too late. Oh, hell, that's starting like 4:30. Like, I could get used to that whole thing. I've been an East Coast guy my whole life. But first off, there's a lot of beautiful territory on the West Coast. Like I said, in spite of the fact that so many people have tried to ruin it for everybody else. But it's beautiful there, and the time zone thing, I get it. It hurts Heisman Trophy cases. It hurts certain teams getting exposure. A lot of the Christian McCaffrey year, for example, which I, by the way, as one of the people that voted for him to win the Heisman, and he didn't, because I watched a lot of those games. And Christian McCaffrey was the best player in college football this year. He did it that year. He did everything, but most people don't see it. So you get hurt by it. It's a disadvantage. It hurts the Pac-12 in a lot of ways. But I got to tell you, for the people that live there, they wouldn't trade it for anything. They love it.
There's actually no doubt. I mean, that's football on the West Coast is really, because I think a lot of times for us down south, and I mean, obviously I'm not down south, but folks in the heartland or wherever, they sort of see the coastal part of our country as, both coasts is like different, right? And college football is in a lot of ways sort of a something that's very popular at smaller places like the state of Alabama or wherever. But what the beauty of college football, Mike, is this: it's that it can happen anywhere. You've had great college football dynasty types in the middle of Los Angeles, all the way to Auburn, Alabama. Very different places, right? You've got a pretty successful college football program in Boston, Massachusetts, but Boston College. People don't understand Boston College actually wins games. They're not great, but it happens there in a little place called Chestnut Hill. It can happen anywhere. And I think that's the beauty of it. And, for years, too, people don't understand, too, California high school football-wise is really, really good. I mean, and they have a junior college system that's really, really good as far as it is a football area. We don't really think about it, but and a lot of it's because of the weather, a lot of it's because of the size of the state. But there's really good football out there. So I'm with you. I sort of figured when you told me you were going out there, it's like Mike's going to really like this. And I'm sure he'll have good things to say, because when I used to have to go to the West Coast for work, when I was traveling for covering recruiting, I loved making those trips. It's just It's different, but at the same time, it's comforting because there's still that passion there for the game.
It's first time I've called a football game there. I did a basketball game at Southern Cal many moons ago, and I've done college football at Arizona State, which is another awesome venue. There's a lot going for. I still maintain, and this is a whole sidebar, and we'll get into the main subjects we came to talk about today. I still maintain the biggest obstacle to the Pac-12 was just poor leadership, and they are still digging out of that hole. And everybody's entitled to make a mistake, but boy, the previous conference commissioner made a big one when he decided I'm smarter than everybody else and I'm going to launch my own network. His background in women's tennis did not pay off in that respect, and they never fully recovered from that. Now, that's not the only thing. You can't, if you're Southern Cal and you're UCLA and you're Arizona State and you're whatever other program that continually has been underachieving, you can't just blame all that on the television contract. But it was a monster boo-boo that they are still trying to recover from. That, among other things, some poor coaching hires. I mean, look at what they're going through at Washington right now. Boy, did that blow up in a hurry. I thought that was supposed to be a brilliant hire.
It wasn't.
It was not. Yeah, I mean, they've had a number of things, and we'll talk about that. I mean, speaking of just head scratchers, you're Texas, you lose at home to Kansas. My goodness gracious. At some point, you got to stop saying, well, all these coaching hires were awful, and that's the problem. There's something deeper there in Austin that seems to be a problem, if you ask me. All right, time to introduce the third member of our distinguished crew for the second time. He made his debut on the last podcast. He is Michael Haney, producer to the stars, longtime sports talk producer, and now continuing to entertain the masses in the music industry, but joining us each time here on JC and Morgan. Michael, how are you, sir?
Doing well, gentlemen. How about yourselves?
Doing well. I know you probably didn't catch a ton of football because you were on the road living the life that people like JC and I would probably dream to have.
Although I was actually on the high seas, Mike.
Well, yeah, it's true. Not on land.
I traded in the road for the for the Atlantic Ocean for a few days.
Yeah, working with Sister Hazel and all that good stuff. So we're back to the pedestrian world of sports talk on land.
I will say, if you've never been to the Rock Boat or been on the Rock Boat, you could do a lot worse vacations for yourself. So check it out.
JC, have you been on a rock boat before?
A rock boat. Is that like a boat with rock and roll?
Yeah. It's I guess the simple answer is it's a music festival on a massive Norwegian cruise ship is what it is. But there's a lot more.
So down with
that.
Yeah, I would. I've never been on one, Michael, but my goodness.
Yeah.
Try to include us on that next year. We'll do this podcast from the Rock Boat.
From the Rock Boat.
And because we don't have to follow
January of 2023. That's the next one now.
Okay, we're in. We don't have to follow the FCC guidelines. This is a podcast, so we whatever goes on the Rock Boat,
and we'll be in international waters. So
oh gosh, no, I mean really anything goes. My goodness, we'll just have a hell of a time, and the rest of our careers might be done, but damn it, the podcast will still go strong as can be. All right, Michael, it's already become pretty much woven into the fabric of American culture. That is the Haney Hot Five for this podcast, where you come up with 5 particular topics that we'll bat around a little bit. So without further ado, what do you have for us today?
All right, gentlemen. Well, we'll just start out with the nice, easy one, because it's the newest news. And even though it's something that hasn't changed much, the college football playoff rankings came out. No change at the top. However, there's something that, while I'm not completely outraged, it's for the second straight week, a bit of a head scratcher. We know things will ultimately play themselves out, but we have Michigan and Michigan State, which we all saw with our own eyes. Michigan State defeat the Wolverines. Yet the Spartans find themselves one spot behind the Wolverines. The one thing that we do hold sacred in the college football game, gentlemen, is that if you play and you win, you get ranked up. If you have a similar record, similar skill set, all of those things, you should be ranked ahead of the team that you beat on the field. However, the College Football Playoff Committee has chosen, for whatever their reasons may be, it could just be for this very discussion, to embrace debate, to drive conversation about the poll itself. But we actually had Gary Barta say last night, this is a direct quote, set aside watching the games, though that's certainly part of it. Statistically, and about every category, offensively and defensively, Michigan comes out on top over Michigan State. End quote. Guys, I get it. I know they're going to play Ohio State. We're going to figure these things out, but it's kind of hard at times to take some of this stuff seriously if the one thing that we all hold sacred is the on-field result doesn't get honored in this particular situation. Your thoughts?
I'll be quick on this, JC. Look, it'd be one thing if Michigan had one loss and Michigan State had 2 or 3. Easy justification to put one over the other. But if it's the same record with similar strength of schedule, and we just saw the head-to-head, this is a really hard one to justify. Now, truth be told, I think Michigan's a better team. I watched that game. They were up 30-14. Michigan State had a 4th and long, and Michigan gave up a huge play. And from that point on, they just self-destructed. But the game is the game, and the game counts. And I would hate to be Gary Barta. And I'm not going to say he's such an easy target. I'm not going to pile on Gary Barta. I heard Luke Fickell saying, yes, has he even played the game? Yes, he has. He was actually part of national championship teams at the FCS level. But that's not even relevant. Like, that's a silly argument. And it makes you sound kind of silly when you make it. The point is that, remember, Barta is just a mouthpiece. Mm-hmm. There's 13 members on this committee. Most of them athletic directors. Mitch Barnhart of Kentucky. You've got the Arizona State AD, the NC State, the Colorado, the K-State. You've got a couple of former players. You got Tyrone Willingham, who always appears to be on these committees. And who else? We got like Louis, the oil change guy down the street. No, it's Vice President for Athletics and Community Wellness at Virginia Union, Joe Taylor. I don't know what the hell that is. Anyway, those are the guys that made the vote. So they throw Barta up there, and he's in a no-win situation, and he tries to explain it, and he just looks worse and worse every time he does it. But I would just tell people to channel your frustrations with the 13 people in that room that actually vote, and they keep putting themselves in this situation where you look really bad doing it. You don't have to do this. Like Michael said, it is going to work out. In the Big Ten, it will work itself out because everybody's playing one another here down the stretch. So why give ammunition to the people that say you guys are a bunch of boobs that don't know what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you there. I think we live in an outraged society in a lot of ways, and people, especially with this sport, and the passion that comes with it, and the subjective nature of how we determine things. I mean, shoot, we in this sport, we use optics to get players. We use optics sometimes to decide how good players are before they even play. We use optics to determine who goes to the playoff. I mean, I get it. And I think that it's almost overemphasized. But you're right, Mike. I mean, trotting this dude out there, it's kind of like what's the guy's name that is Bill Hancock?
Oh, yeah, another one.
Bill Hancock. Okay, so Hancock, he's probably one of the nicest guys in all of college football that has anything to do with any sort of college football, right? Everybody you talk to that knows him, loves him, thinks he's a good guy. This guy, for years and years and years, you would ask him a direct question and nothing but a steaming pile of horse poop would come out of his mouth, and you knew it. Oh, we're perfectly happy with the BCS. Oh, we have even like 2 weeks before they announced the playoff. Oh, we're fine with our model right now. Meanwhile, they're working on the daggum, playoff things they've been working on for 2 years. So, his job was kind of to run interference. And I think that's unfortunate. That's why I would not want this job. Gary Barta's poor guy. I would not want to be him.
No. What, do they give him a gift certificate to Applebee's? I mean, I don't think it pays anything.
Yeah, no, you're just there. And look, I think that I would like to see some metrics and, I guess more objective criteria added to the college football playoff committee. Like they do in basketball where they use the net rankings and stuff. You still don't get the same thing every year in basketball, but you can kind of guess and tell and go, okay, well, this is why, this is that. They don't use any of that in football. It's just like, all right, let's rank them, boys and girls, let's do it. And because that committee changes, you have different criteria, and you can always throw the eyeball test up there. Now I'll say this, as far as Michigan State goes, looking at those two teams, other than Michigan's brand is better, I just don't see a nickel's bit of difference between what they've done on the field. Nice win at Penn State this weekend, but in case we haven't noticed, Penn State's gone in the crapper the last few weeks, including losing to Illinois.
The last 2 years.
Everybody, well, what about this loss to Purdue? Well, Iowa was second in the country, and Purdue cut them. They're kind of the upset team this year. So I don't know. Other than Michigan being Michigan and Michigan State being Michigan State, that's the question. So that's the problem with that is that when you do that, and there's really not a nickel's bit of difference between the two, you sort of go, well, you're going to defer to the big brand regardless of if we beat them or not. And then that's unfortunate. But, who knows if that's the case or not. Eyeball test wise, Mike, I think Michigan's probably a better football team than Michigan State. And I did watch that game just like you did. Michigan had them whipped, and It was just a credit Michigan State with coming back. But when you're just looking at the resume, I'm like, well, they did this, they did that, they did this, they did that. I guess Michigan State has the worst loss because they lost to Purdue and all that. But we'll just see. And regardless of, in spite of all this is all getting worked out because Ohio State's in their division. And I don't think Michigan State's played either one of those, or Ohio State's not played either one of those teams. So, this is all going to get figured out here pretty soon.
Here's where you lose people. When you've got a situation like that and they just watched Michigan State win the game, albeit in a come from behind fashion, and your rationale, your justification for flip-flopping those two is things like offensive and defensive efficiency. Nobody wants to hear that. I mean, that's just nobody wants that. Those kind of metrics work a lot better in college basketball than they do in college football. They just do. College football is not a sport that really lends itself to offensive and defensive efficiency, truly telling the story. I can buy Michigan in a rematch would be a favorite to beat Michigan State, and I still think top to bottom is a better team. And I'm not just basing that on brand name. I mean, I think this is Harbaugh's best overall team.
Yeah.
And I think Michigan State's a great story, and they've got a national coach of the year candidate who deserves all the credit in the world for what he's done this year. But I don't think Michigan State is a great team. And we might look back at all this as a waste of oxygen if Ohio State beats Michigan again, and Ohio State, who might be the only team in the country that can score on Georgia, maybe we'll just laugh that we even spent this much time on it. And with that, I'm not going to spend any more time on it. Other than the only other storyline out there is Cincinnati to me, because we knew Ohio State and Oregon would be 3 and 4. We knew Georgia and Bama would be 1 and 2. And I'm sorry, Cincinnati fans. I'm sorry, Group 5 fans. I'm sorry, Mike Oresco, who's about to lose Cincinnati anyway. I just don't see a scenario where Cincinnati is getting in with this system, which is why you better support a 12-team playoff, even if it's not exactly constructed the way you want it, because you are never getting in a 4-team playoff. There is just too many people in that room that don't want to see it happen.
You really? I mean, so you think? Sorry, it's a hypothetical, Mike.
Okay.
Cincinnati wins out, right?
Yep. Gotcha.
Whoever comes out of the Ohio State, Michigan cluster will get in.
Okay.
Well, let's assume that Oregon gets in. Let's assume Georgia beats Alabama in the SEC championship game. Alabama with 2 losses gets in over undefeated Cincinnati.
I think they would. And if it's not Alabama, if it's not a 2-loss Alabama, maybe it's a 1-loss Oklahoma. Maybe it's Oklahoma State. Maybe it's a 1-loss Notre Dame, even though they lost to Cincinnati, which would be egregious to do that.
What about a 1-loss Wake Forest coming out of the ACC?
Yeah, I mean, if that happened, a 1-loss Wake, a 1-loss ACC champ will get in over Cincinnati.
You think so?
I would guarantee you. I would guarantee that. The only way it doesn't happen is your scenario that you started with, which is if the dominoes fall and it truly comes down to a 2-loss team from the Power 5 in Cincinnati. I don't think Cincinnati's beating a 1-loss conference champion from the Power 5 for that 4th and final slot. I'm not saying that's the way it should be. This is not me on my Power 5 high horse. I'm not anti-Group 5 at all. I'm just telling you, read the room. Look at these rankings. They're telling you. What's that expression? If somebody keeps showing you who they are, it's time to believe it. They're telling you, Cincinnati, your undefeated record doesn't mean nearly as much as these 1-loss teams and their resume. They're telling you that when you beat Tulsa by a 1 touchdown, when game day is there, that was your chance to really validate who you are, and you didn't give us enough. You didn't win enough style points. Yeah. I just don't see it happening.
Well, in Cincinnati, honestly, Mike, since they beat UCF 56-21, you got to struggle against one of the worst Navy teams they've had in years. I mean, Navy's 2 and everybody assumes Navy's probably 10-2 because they're 2-7 and fired their OC. They had Tulane, which people probably also think is decent because of they played Oklahoma close in the opener, right? And they haven't watched any Tulane football since then. And Tulane's 1-9 and 0-6 in the league. They were down at halftime. You mentioned the Tulsa game, and then USF, who shout out to Jeff Scott and Bobby Bentley and that staff, for putting points on the board in a game that got away from them, but then they fought hard. That was an uninspiring win last Friday night too, Mike. So, beating – and look, all of this will be over if SMU and Sonny Dykes pull the upset, which could happen Saturday. It may, and I may even pick it. But, it hasn't been exactly like the Bearcats have been rolling over everybody since that win in South Bend. Another thing that hurts them too is, man, Indiana was supposed to at least be decent this year, and they're not. They're back to Indiana after last year's really nice deal with it. So, I mean, they're like they're not very good at all. They've won 2 games. So, and one was a 2-point win against Western Kentucky. So they're got blown out by Rutgers. So that hurts them too. I mean, and sometimes when you schedule, Indiana, it's on the road, and you're thinking going into the season, well, they won. They would have been in the playoff had we had an expanded playoff last year. And now they're just terrible. And so that hurts them too. But I'm with you on, hey, Cincinnati has not been – they've won, but they haven't passed the eyeball test the last few years or past few weeks. And that win in South Bend is getting further and further in the rearview mirror. And, in fact, I believe, Mike, if those two teams played tomorrow or Saturday, Notre Dame would probably win by 2 touchdowns.
There you have it. Michael Haney, number 2.
All right. JC, you mentioned just a bit ago that you don't envy having Garrett Barta's job. It's just an unenviable position to be in. Another one of those positions is to be the guy after the guy. So one of the somewhat surprising moves yesterday, Virginia Tech parted ways with Justin Fuente after 6 years. JC, I'll start with you. Is that just simply a case of following Frank Beamer, the legend, and being the guy after the guy? Or were there just much deeper issues under Fuente's reign in Blacksburg?
Nah, Fuente should have worked out. That was actually when that job opened up 2015, Beamer retired, and you kind of look at the plan for Virginia Tech. It's like, well, recruiting is important here, but it's more of a school where they're going to go they're more of a find player school than a school that's going to sign top 10 classes. That's how it was built. And Beamer and his staff did a great job finding under the radar guys, and then sprinkling in the Michael Vicks and, the Kevin Joneses and guys like that. I mean, they got to the point where they could do it. And that's one style of recruiting. So you look at Fuente at Memphis, and they had that Paxton Lynch kid that time, and they had found him down in South Florida. And you're like, oh, this guy sees that his style of recruiting, because he comes from the Gary Patterson coaching tree and all that, this evaluation and all that's pretty good. Well, what nobody knew at the time, and Fuente kind of had talked to some other schools during that search, and had straight up just said, I don't like to recruit, and I'm not going to get involved with this stuff and all this other stuff. I don't think anybody realized just how bad that it was. Like, just how much of a, hey, I can just go sign anybody and go out there and win. Now, he was a good enough coach to where he could just go sign anybody or whatever and probably win 5 games in the ACC at Virginia Tech. But, the team he inherited from Frank Beamer was his best team back in 2016. You remember they went to the ACC championship game. They were a touchdown away from beating Clemson in that game. And then it just never, ever took off. And I was surprised they didn't fire him last year. He wasn't a guy that, folks around Blacksburg, which is a very small place, embraced so much. Fans didn't like him. He was abrasive. And there could be some guy following the guy there, but, on paper, Justin Fuente should have worked out because he was a quote unquote fit. So this is yet another one that at the time And Mike and I had this podcast at the time, but we were like, yeah, it's a great hire. And it looked right for a little while, but then it eroded. And, Mike said earlier, if somebody shows you who they are, believe them. And I think Fuente, we all kind of thought, oh, yeah, sure, you don't like to recruit. And then you think, well, he's just an evaluator, and he'll go find guys anyway that he likes. No, he wasn't even doing that. I mean, it was just like, hey, man, you want to play at Virginia Tech? Come on, man. We'll win 5 games, and you can't today's age fans want to see you go at least try, especially in that state. People may not know this about Virginia Tech because you hear Tech and you think, well, it's like Georgia Tech and engineering school or whatever. It's like other techs, Texas Tech around the country. Virginia Tech is basically the state university of Virginia. UVA is a public Ivy, Thomas freaking Jefferson, all that, wahoo wah. That's a different animal than a big, large state-supported university in the South. It's Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University is the official name. So all like your average Joe kids that, get into just state U and go to college, they all go to Virginia Tech. That's what it is. And so that is a massive fan base and a massive alumni base and a lot of pride. And it's in a football heavy state, and they've been great at football before. So they expect you to at least go try. Virginia Tech has its challenges because of its location in Southwest Virginia, whereas the talent bases in that state are way over on the coast in the 757 or up in Nova outside of DC. And it's hard to get every one of those kids because you're isolated a little bit, right? You're not in Richmond. You're way over there in the southwestern portion of the state in the mountains. But Frank Beamer got his share and then found guys. Fuente wasn't even willing to go get his share. So I know all the Hokies are glad he's gone. Going to be interesting to see who replaces him this morning. I heard a very interesting name, Dave Clawson from Wake Forest, from one of my Hokie sources. And, Billy Napier's in it. You hear Chadwell, all that. But, Clawson is kind of the name du jour to keep an eye on when you're talking about who the next coach of the Hokies is. And I think, guys, it's a fantastic job. I think there's just a lot you can do at Virginia Tech if you understand where you're at and know what you are doing.
Well, heck, if you get it even close to where Frank had it for much of his time, you could dominate the Coastal Division if nothing else. Mm-hmm. I mean, even if you go and get spanked in Charlotte every year, you could rack up a bunch of divisional title banners in Blacksburg. Look, speaking of Frank, I mean, Frank Beamer was not only successful, he's one of the most likable, affable, classy guys out there. So to follow that up with a frosty, antisocial, somewhat abrasive guy, that's okay if you're winning. And when he goes in there in year one and wins the Coastal, that's okay. From that point on, I think he only had one season where he won more than 6 games. So, they don't expect Virginia Tech. That fan base is pretty educated on who they are. They don't expect Virginia Tech to win the ACC every year. So you don't have to be number 1 in the ACC, but you can't be number 7 or 9. You should be top 5 in that conference on a pretty consistent basis, and he just didn't do that. And then he rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Oh, by the way, lose to Old Dominion. I'm not sure if they ever recovered from that. And then this year they had Notre Dame on the ropes. And to quote the late, great Dennis Green, we let them off the hook. They let them off. They blew a 29-21 lead with 3:55 to play and wound up losing, I believe 32-29 was the final in that score. And they just never recovered from that. Look, you and I used to do a segment, JC, hits and misses. And believe it or not, I enjoyed talking about where I was wrong more than where I was right, because I think that's more interesting. People going on the air and talking about how right they were is about as fun as a scratch golfer talking about what a great round he had. Wake me up when that's over, breaking down the hole by hole. Well, then on 12, I decided to break out the 7-iron. The fact of the matter is, I thought Fuente was about as close to a home run hire as there was at that time. And I would have bet that he would have worked out quite well in Blacksburg. He didn't. And it goes more to what I do believe and what I always say, that there's so much attention on ADs and what the hiring process is. At the end of the day, it's all a crapshoot. And at the end of the day, you get who wants your job. Like you don't sit there and schmooze them into taking your job over one that they really think is a better gig. So when you look at these candidates, it's a lot of mid-major guys, the same names we seem to be talking about every year: Jamie Chadwell, Billy Napier, Sonny Dykes. Then you throw in the Brent Venables as a guy that's going to be mentioned. I don't think he leaves now for that. Mike Elko is going to be a head coach somewhere. Someone's going to pluck him out of Texas A&M. I just don't know who. Will Healy out of Charlotte. Those are the same. And then, of course, you mentioned Clausen. And I love Clausen, having done a couple Wake games the last couple of years. I just think he's in such a perfect fit for him. Maybe they just offered too much money, and maybe Clausen says, you know what, as much pride as I take in being a developmental program and being a classic overachiever, there are a lot of athletes in Tidewater that I could do some magical things with. Maybe so. But whoever does get that job, to go back to Haney's initial point, you're no longer the guy following the legend. You're the guy following the guy who just failed. So that's a little less pressure on that next guy. That makes the job perhaps even a little more attractive. And I wish Vodtech well, because I think college football, it's one of those programs. College football is better when Virginia Tech is good. And lately they've been kind of in the abyss.
All right, gentlemen. Well, to that end, there is another school that we talked about last time in TCU that parted ways with their legend, Gary Patterson. So tying those two jobs together now, TCU and Virginia Tech, what do you think, if anything, that TCU, if they choose to, can learn from what Virginia Tech just went through for their own coaching search coming up to replace the legend in Gary Patterson?
Go ahead. You take that one first, JC.
There were a lot of sunny, and this is one too. The more I go, there's no question things were not trending well for Gary Patterson at TCU. Okay, we all love Gary Patterson. We all respect him. I mean, I've probably spent more time talking about Gary Patterson on this podcast through all 150 episodes than any other coach. And there's no question about it. But you look at kind of the last few years and you see that, in the preseason, everybody, well, look out for TCU. They're going to be good. And then it's like a 7-6, or it's a 5-7, or it's something like that. And they get off to 3-5. There's some brutal losses for them this year, especially to Texas. And so it may have been time, once you're someplace for a long, long time and it gets a little stale and you're about on your third or fourth year of not meeting the expectations that you've created, maybe it's time. I don't like the way it was handled. I don't like the whole thing. Well, we can go ahead and announce this and have a Gary Patterson day, or you can just leave. Looking kind of at the AD, he's one of these guys that I look at that's an athletic director, and I'm like, be careful what you wish for when you want to change ADs. Kind of a new guy that's got his own opinions. And so then I look and I'm like, well, I hear they want to hire Sonny Dykes, and he's right across town at SMU. And that's really what did it. They don't like losing to SMU at TCU, and then they did. And okay, we'll go hire Sonny. Well, then no. There's all these people they're going to interview. They're going to interview Deion Sanders and all these other people. And I'm like, look, and then I hear from my SMU contacts that Dykes probably ain't going to take that TCU job if he has to be part of a big dog and pony show interview process, because again, SMU is right across town and it's their rival. And you just don't, obviously TCU being in the Big 12 is a better fit, so to speak, than being at SMU. And SMU didn't get the invite to the table, but you just really don't want to, tinkle all over the Mustangs and do it. You know what I'm saying? So I've got a lot of questions about that process. And I think I told my Virginia Tech guy today, they said, well, who do you think the Hokies should hire? I said, I'd hire Gary Patterson. He's 61 years old. You're like, well, he's not going to be here in 9 years. Well, dude, 9 years, if you get 9 years out of any coach these days, you're doing something right. So, I don't know. As far as who gets that job, the Dykes name was out there for a while. I thought it would just kind of be a layup, but who knows who's getting it now? I mean, when I think of TCU football, I think of Gary Patterson, and Dennis Franchione before him did some good things. And then before that was like Pat Sullivan and a lot of guys. I mean, they were terrible at TCU. So I hope that this decision that they made, my concern is, does it work out for Gary Patterson? First and foremost, I hope he gets another job soon. But also the other thing is this, it's like for TCU, I kind of expect them to take a big step back. I think in a couple of years, just like when Texas Tech thought they were going to be great, get rid of Mike Leach, and we see how that's worked out for them. You kind of look at it, and I in my gut, I kind of feel the same way for TCU. I think that their heyday, we're probably going to be sitting there, guys, 10 years from now, going, "Hey, remember when they were good under Gary Patterson?" Yeah. And they've got money and all that, and that's scary to me too, guys, because you get somebody in there that could win if you gave him a chance, and you fire him after 3 years, and then you get in kind of the Tennessee vicious circle and stuff. I mean, because they do have the money to go do it, and so that's another concern about that program as well. I just something about that just doesn't sit well with me. Even though I'm a big Gary Patterson homer to begin with, I mean, something about it just kind of just the feel I get is not good. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Honest to God, if I am TCU, I'm probably heading up to Chicago and interviewing one Thomas Herman to come try to take that job, because that's the type of guy that, you kind of get on the rebound. I think he fits at a place like TCU. I think he's got energy and redemption and all that going for him. But, it looks like they want to kind of it looks like right now at TCU, it's more about the AD than it is about anybody else. And we all know that when arrogance meets ignorance, it can be dangerous.
I tell you, having done games there right around the time they expanded Amon Carter Stadium, we took a tour. They put $113 million into that stadium. They have what's called the Founders Suites. Mm-hmm. If you wanted to get a Founders Suite, the price tag was $15 million, and people bought them. I think there's 4 of them or 6 of them that each had to pay $15 million. That's a lifetime suite. That's a lot of money. It's beautiful seats, great buffet. It's $15 million. So to your point on the money, they do have incredible resources there, like all those Texas schools do. I think part of what really burns the TCU brass up is they see Baylor bouncing back yet again. Yeah. And they kind of look at those schools in similar lights and, religious schools. And they say, well, gosh, Baylor was dead and buried. And in the meantime, we watch them resurrect where they're a power again under Coach Aranda. And we're just sitting there swimming in mediocrity. The other thing that's going on is that with the eventual departure, which I believe will be in 2023, of Oklahoma and Texas to the SEC, with that in mind, it's there for the taking. Like one of these schools can become the preeminent Big 12 power that Oklahoma has been, that Texas once was. It's anybody's ball game. You can be that. TCU can be that. Anybody can be that. So this hire is a big one for them. I think Tom Herman is an interesting name. I think there's a lot of people that would be intrigued by this job, but I don't know how you do better overall than what Gary Patterson did.
Yeah, I mean, I'm reading like Napier and Matt Campbell and.
Why is Matt Campbell going to take that
Matt
job?
Campbell's not taking that job. No. Matt Campbell, I'm going to tell you this. I'm going to say something about Matt Campbell, and you guys correct me if you think I think Southern Cal could be a job he takes. I'm just going to say that based on what I've heard.
Would not surprise me.
But they're like totally dysfunctional out there. I think, I don't, I could see them screwing that up. But barring something like that, or like a Michigan for Matt Campbell or Ohio State, whatever, I think he's fine where he's at. And you mentioned the Big 12 changing, Mike. I mean, Iowa State has been, they probably weren't as good this year as we thought they'd be. But, man, they're sitting pretty. I mean, who do you have to beat now? Oklahoma and Texas are gone in that league. So Iowa State's actually a better job now that Oklahoma and Texas are gone out of that league than it was. So, but yeah, you read names like that and you read Sonny Dykes and kind of the story there. And it's like, it sounds to me like some folks are kind of maybe have a higher opinion of what that job actually is than it was. But hey, money talks. And like you said, they can easily write a check for whatever they want.
Well, you mentioned a lot of names there, JC, that have been regurgitated around the coaching carousel the last couple of years. Some people that are ready to take that next jump and some that are just going to be batted about for a lot until they finally get their opportunity. But some interesting hires, I guess, to say the least. We talked about Texas Tech the last time on the show. They've now filled their void with a longtime high school coach and Baylor assistant now for the last 5 years, Joey McGuire. And also Jim Mora Jr. trying to revitalize his coaching career at UConn. So, gentlemen, your thoughts on the Texas Tech and UConn voids being filled right now with Texas Tech taking a swing on a longtime high school coach and Jim Mora Jr. trying to do the right thing and get his name back in the good graces.
Okay, I'll start with Mora. I mean, I thought the guy did some good things with the Falcons, and then there was a disaster of a season with the Seahawks, and where he openly campaigned to get the University of Washington. He's never gotten the Washington job, and you have to wonder too, because Washington didn't come open until after he'd taken the UConn job. Maybe he didn't want to campaign a little bit for that one because he's a Husky through and through. I thought Mora did an okay job at UCLA, recruiting wise, especially. They got a good staff. Recruiting at UCLA is never really an issue. Although Chip Kelly numerically doesn't recruit that well, but that's a different point. Beat SC on players, top 10 classes. He just didn't win enough. I mean, and it's not like, it kind of bottomed out. He was 9-5, 10-3, 10-3, 8-5. Then you got a 4-8 that snuck in there, and then a 5-6, and you're out. Seattle's was a tough job when he took it over. Atlanta, the Falcons, that's all. Obviously, Mike and I both know that's a tough job. Nothing compares to UConn. This is not only a job that is the bottom has fallen out, but they have like structural issues there where I don't think they joined a conference. Did they, guys? Did they join Conference USA?
No.
They didn't.
I don't think so. I think they're still
went independent.
I'm still waiting for Conference USA to wave the white flag already, but it's kind of like when you're playing chess and your opponent's got the queen, the bishop, the rook, and you're sitting there with 3 pawns and you just keep moving your king around until you finally say, okay, enough is enough. But Conference USA is still breathing, baby.
Look, man, and I'll say this. Listen, people talk about basketball schools a lot, right? Hey, this school is a basketball school. Normally they talk about who? Kansas. By the way, shout out to the Jayhawks for beating Texas this past weekend. Kansas, North Carolina, UCLA, Indiana, places like that. And look, a lot of Kentucky, obviously, some of that's a myth because Kentucky and North Carolina, they have support for football. UCLA has support for football. Kansas, when they had Mangino, they got support for football. Indiana last year, they're just not good at football. And there are reasons those programs have not been that successful for one reason or another. Okay, with Kansas and Kentucky and Indiana, it's recruiting base, but there's a difference between being one of those schools that's good in basketball, therefore a basketball school, and UConn, which said we are going to sacrifice football for the sake of basketball. I mean, that's different. That's definitely a basketball school, folks, men and women, because they got out of the American so their basketball program could join the Big East again, because not in women's basketball, but men's basketball, it was getting a little challenging to go play at South Florida or play wherever when they belonged in a league where they got to play Georgetown and Villanova and those kind of schools. And they actually made that move. So it's the ultimate basketball school that you're going to coach football at. And so, man, look, maybe this is like Terry Bowden taking the Louisiana Monroe job or Akron or the jobs he's taken. And, Moore just wants a chance. But as hard as UCLA is, as hard as the Falcons are, as difficult as that one year in Seattle was, guys, this is just a different level of challenge. And so I thought it was an interesting hire. I'm sure he had a plan. And I don't think if he goes and wins 2 games in 4 years there and gets fired, that's really even indicative of what kind of coach he is, because I don't think he's that bad of a coach. But man, oh man, that is definitely a tough gig to go take up there at Connecticut at this point with that program.
Yeah, I'll keep it real quick on both these guys. To me, and I'm with you, JC, I don't think Jim Mora has done a terrible job anywhere he's been. But the fact that he fell to this job tells me if I'm Jim Mora's agent, I kicked the tires on a lot of other openings and there was just no traction. And so now you have to take one of these. This is like the Lane Kiffin FAU deal. This is like, you mentioned Terry Bowden, although, he's more perhaps on the tail end of his career. But sometimes you just got to suck it up and take something that is kind of beneath you, if you will. And this job, in a lot of ways, I think is beneath Jim Mora. I'm not saying Jim Mora is the best thing since sliced bread, but I would have thought he could have landed in a better spot than this, because this is beyond the abyss. I mean, this is, you're out there in the middle of the Atlantic in a submarine and in the darkness, and you're trying to find yourself like a goldfish or something in the middle of coral and all kinds of crap, and you're like, where's that goldfish at? I don't know what to make of this at all. I mean, I thought UConn was going to bail on football or at least go to 1AA. I don't know what they gain. I want to say it's financial, but is it really? How much money are they gaining by staying FBS? Maybe they ought to just go back to FCS like the good old Skip Holtz days and be a regular contributor in the FCS playoff and whatnot. Anyway, I don't want to be
UMass same way, I think. I mean, UMass would be – they actually were gaining traction and going to playoffs in one way, and then it didn't happen.
I bet you if you polled 1,000 college football fans, most of them wouldn't even know UMass was FBS. They probably would say, what? Huh? That can't be true.
And scheduling for UMass has just been a nightmare.
That's brutal. It's just not – look, making that move is not for everybody. For the App States of the world – it's a great move. For the UCFs of the world, it's a great move. For UConn and UMass, I don't know about that. The other one you could probably speak more to because it clearly was a recruiting hire, right? I mean, when you hired Joey McGuire, that was a great movie, by the way. You remember the little kid? How much is a human brain? Oh, that was Jerry Maguire. I'm sorry. But Joey McGuire, even though I must admit I know nothing about Joey McGuire, he might as well have been Jerry Maguire or the goofy little kid in that movie, who I think became a roid head. That's beside the point. I don't know much about this hire other than he's a Texas guy who's got Texas connections and he's going to hire Texas people. He's going to recruit Texas kids, and that's how Texas Tech is going to be better than Matt Wells, who didn't do a terrible job to begin with. So I have a lukewarm feeling on that hire in general.
I know Joey McGuire a little bit. We have some mutual friends from his days as a high school coach in Texas, and a lot of my folks that worked Texas that I have respect for love Joey McGuire. They think he's an outstanding coach.
Cuba Gooding Jr. loves Joey McGuire. Again, sorry, wrong one. My bad.
Show me the money, right? You complete me. Anyway,
show me the quad.
Let's just throw it all out there. All right, the zoo's closed, Ray. Let's just get it all out there in the open.
The human head weighs 8 pounds.
I did not shoplift never mind. But you guys know me, and I did actually. Anyway, but back to the point.
Yes.
All right, so let's. It's weird because most of these high school coaches from Texas that have gotten jobs, guys, a job like Texas Tech are like offensive, like prodigy types. You think back through it, the Chad Morrises, the Art Briles, those guys. Seth Luttrell, I think. I mean, there's just there's a long list of high school coaches from Texas that have come to major college football, been OCs, and some of them have been head coaches. This is different. This guy's an outside linebackers coach. And if you want to talk about the Dabo Sweeney model, that's what this is. This is a guy that's going to have to hire great coordinators and go recruit. The problem is some of these places, and to a lesser extent, this is Virginia Tech's issue too, a little bit. But I talked about that scenario earlier. Texas Tech is in Lubbock. Let me repeat that. Texas Tech is in Lubbock, Texas, right? That is very hard to recruit to. They had kind of their thing going with Leach, and then, the Tuberville thing didn't work out. And so then you go and you get Kingsbury, who actually is winning now in the NFL for whatever reason. But there's no defense. And, it wasn't that they wouldn't hire good D coordinators or coaches. It's just that you look at their personnel on defense compared to offense, and you're like, it's not only hard to recruit to Lubbock, it's almost impossible to get good defensive players out here, And so I understand there is fundamentally a recruiting problem. That said, I think to raise the level of recruiting at Texas Tech the way a fan base would expect it right now, or when you hire a Joey McGuire and you're starting to think we're going to go head to head with the Longhorns and Aggies and start getting these guys, that's not going to happen ever. Because you even look at how that school has had success in other sports, Mike. Chris Beard, who's now at Texas, one of the best basketball coaches, I think, in America. How did he get Texas Tech to the national championship game? Well, he took 7 transfers and he molded them together, and they ended up winning and going all the way to the finals. So I think there's different ways that you can acquire talent in different sports at different schools. I don't know that going the recruiter route like they're doing is the answer. That said, there's nobody that's going to be pulling for Joey McGuire to win more than I am, because I think it's a heck of a story. Like I said, we have mutual friends. I've met him a couple of times. He is a hell of a dude, like a hell of a dude. And it would be great if he would win there. But that hire really, really surprised me, when all was said and done. And I think, too, Texas Tech's going through a little bit of Baylor envy as well, which is why they plucked the guy away. So that's the deal there. And we'll see how it works. But it was a surprising hire to me. I think that, it is a recruiting-based hire. But, guys, I'm telling you, there's some places where you're just – I don't care who you get to sell ketchup popsicles to a lady in white gloves. You have to understand you're not going to go head-to-head and beat these powerhouses on just about anybody, right? So then the question becomes, well, how do we get enough talent to compete? Well, there's ways you do that, but it's not the way that everybody thinks. And so that would be what the concern would be of mine is, all right, we got this guy that's personality-wise, he can go head-to-head and win recruiting battles, but we're still in Lubbock and we're still the Red Raiders, and here's what we are. So we'll see what happens. But that's my take on that.
2 pieces of advice for Joey McGuire. Don't lose the same recruiting battles apparently that Matt Wells did, and don't lose Cush as a client the day before the draft, the number 1 pick, because that killed who killed him. Jay Moore, by the way, played a really good creep in that movie. Right,
Heck
Michael?
Yeah. Came here to let you go.
Hey, and,
it's real, man. It's happening. You're gone.
How about Glenn Fry as the GM?
Glenn Fry.
Yes. And how about a little music, sports movie tie-in right there with Glenn Fry at the GM.
The late Glenn Fry. May he rest in peace.
Yes, absolutely. Gentlemen, I did have one headline that I was going to get to, but it's more of an existential thing about college football that we can save for another episode. I have to get to this developing story, though, because I would be remiss if we saved this for another little while.
Breaking news.
Yeah, a little bit. Well, I call it developing story, Mike. We got
not breaking news.
Not breaking just yet. It's developing, but I believe that it will be breaking very soon. A team that we spent some time discussing at the top of the episode, Michigan State, according to the Detroit Free Press, working on a historic 10-year, $95 million contract extension for one Mel Tucker. Gentlemen, take that in for a second. I'll read just a little bit more about this. Alumni Matt Ishbia and Steve St. Andre will donate the private funding to the school for Tucker's raise, according to a local Inside the Locker Room podcast. The former MSU Board of Trustees member and Michigan State radio analyst Jason Sehorn, university sources confirmed that Ishbia and St. Andre as the donors for the new contract. Guys, Mel Tucker is set to get paid here, but he hasn't even coached a bowl game yet as a head coach, I don't believe. So this is some incredible money on the way for.
Yeah. Look, I already praised him in our opening block, saying he's a prime candidate for National Coach of the Year. He's done a tremendous job. Now, let me temper that a little bit. He hadn't done a ton yet, okay? I mean, it's one good year, and to start making him one of, if not the highest paid coach in college football seems a little bit insane. But, hey, it's not my money. Go for what you know. I mean, I get it. It's kind of a defensive move because certainly there are going to be some guys teams that perhaps kick the tires to see if they can pluck him away. I don't know if he's ahead on everybody's board of James Franklin or some of the other names. Lane Kiffin, Jimbo Fisher's not leaving. We can talk about that later. But do you really have to pay $9.5 million to keep Mel Tucker? I don't know. But if nothing else, if you're a Michigan State fan, it shows there's a commitment to something over there, because you don't have to pay that kind of money. If you're going to go ahead and pay it, that makes you feel good about that. Yeah, there you go.
I wouldn't have done it.
I wouldn't have spent $9.5 million. Like, who are you bidding against? Would be my question.
I mean, his name had been banted, talked about for LSU, and a lot of people were pushing that in the national media because he used to be an assistant there. But look, man, I that would have been his third job in 3 years. I mean, maybe he'd be like Todd Graham and finally get somewhere and settle in. But it was being pushed. But I still maintain that when you look at Scott Woodward's hiring track record, he's not a guy that goes for the latest big name, that the 1 year wonder kind of deal, right?
No, he goes for
the guys that have had years of track record, and I just so I never bought it. And that's nothing against Mel Tucker or Billy Napier or either one. I figured he would shoot for the moon for some other guys. And I still think there's a good shot that LSU ends up with somebody that we're all sitting there going, wow, nobody ever saw that.
You know my theory on LSU. I don't know. I don't have much more to add on Mel Tucker. My theory on LSU is because there's still people, I know them. I know LSU fans that swear up and down Scott Woodward gets whoever he wants. So they want Jimbo Fisher, and they're going to get him. Jimbo's just smoke screen. He's leaving. Folks, he's not leaving. He's not leaving. It's not a knock on your job. It's not a knock on LSU. They just made him an incredibly lucrative contract. He owns all this property in Texas. And he didn't replace 3 consecutive coaches that won a national title. So I don't think he's leaving. And then the one becomes, well, we can always get Lane Kiffin whenever we want. I told you, JC, I had this debate with Andy Staples on Sirius XM. I'm not so sure of that either. I know I'm in the minority on that one. I'm not positive that Lane is ready to that he's so anxious to jump there when he's got it pretty good at Ole Miss. So you might not get exactly who you want at LSU. You just might not. It's a fantastic job, but I the names that are coming out there, it's just under the assumption of we can get whoever the heck we want, and anybody will leave where they are to go here, and that mentality has been tried by a lot of other programs in recent years, and doesn't always work out that way.
Yeah, and this is kind of your theory being put to the test, Mike. With that,
of least resistance.
You do have an AD there that's got I mean, nobody said Chris Peterson. People said Peterson will never leave Boise, and he left. Scott Woodward. Jimbo Fisher. And look, man, there were some things about Fisher and Florida State. That was a divorce
contentious.
That was coming, right?
Yes, correct.
But it was A&M and not, we had always heard Auburn, Alabama, LSU. Those were Jimbo's jobs he wanted. He's an Alabama guy or coached at Auburn or whatever. No, he's A&M. So there we go. Buzz Williams, I think from the time he got to Virginia Tech, they were like, well, if Texas or Texas A&M hires him, he's gone. I mean, that was true. But then you get to LSU and he hires Kim Mulkey, which if you follow women's basketball, that's like a huge earth-shattering type of hire in that sport. There's only a handful of women's basketball coaches that you'd even want to go, pluck. That would have been like Pat Summitt leaving Tennessee in her prime, which is amazing. And then he made a pretty good hire in baseball at LSU. And that's the one thing, if you're kind of looking at this going, well, he's not going to necessarily get who he wants this time. LSU baseball, Mike, it. Great job. Tremendous, right? One of the best in the country.
Absolutely.
And he got a guy that's been to the College World Series from a good job at Arizona to come take it. But there were a lot of other names being thrown out for the baseball job there, and it didn't happen. So maybe this is the same kind of thing. I honestly think, though, no matter who gets LSU, unless he just completely screws it up, they really have enough options from coaches that will crawl on their belly through glass to get it, to where it's going to be really hard to make a hire that's like their last two, which I would call underwhelming at the time, although they have produced national championships eventually.
Well, I find it interesting with the Mel Tucker news coming about that he would move past Ed Orgeron, who is now not going to be at LSU anymore. He was making over $9 million, and Tucker's potential new contract now would be second only to Nick Saban. So how much does that reset the actual coaching contract and money? Because if Mel Tucker, who hasn't even played in or coached in a bowl game yet, is getting $9.5 million, what is LSU going to have to offer someone to come in? That's the big thing for me, is how much does this reset the coaching salary market, much the way that Nick Saban did, over a decade ago at Alabama.
There's no question it goes up, and we're not far off from it. It's no longer going to be shocking when you hear $10 million a year football coach. That is where we're headed. And I always say, if you want to know the market value, where the market is heading on the coaches circle in college football, college basketball, just keep an eye on the TV contracts. And you got a couple of big ones coming up here soon. And of course the SEC already got, G'd up when ESPN outbid CBS for their game of the week. But you've got some other conference deals that are going to be massive here coming up in the near future. And that's where this comes from. It's not that they just raised ticket prices, $10 a pop. It's TV money. TV money drives coaches' salaries, and that's where the market will continue to escalate.
Yeah, and I'll say this, we mentioned earlier about coaches getting fired earlier. That continues to happen. You're going to end up having to pay more, because and look, I'll be honest. There used to be a time where I was so pro coach, I'd be like, oh, so feels bad for this guy getting fired. Man, what about his family and all this other stuff? And then I started realizing something, Mike, the money they're making, these coaches, for walking away and for losing, which is what you're doing a bad job if you're losing. Losing is generational wealth. I mean, their grandkids aren't going to have to work. So I quit feeling sorry for coaches a couple of years ago, head coaches that get fired.
Did you see the article? I'm sorry to interrupt you. Did you see the article, to your point, on what they call dead money, right? Buyouts.
Yeah. A lot of dead money. SEC.
On ESPN. From 2010 through the 10-year period, 2010 to January 2021, basically a 10-year period, FBS schools paid football and men's and women's basketball coaches more than $533 million not to coach. Dead money. You're just paying them not to coach. Over $500 million. And people always say, well, we shouldn't do that. That's just stupid. Our AD shouldn't offer buyouts. Well, then the coach is going to go somewhere else. This is the mark. Like, they have the leverage. If you are a hot coach, you're not going to go to the school that doesn't give you a buyout if they fire you. And if you're a really hot coach like Jimbo Fisher, I mean, this is insane. Jimbo Fisher has the most unique contract on the planet. Yeah. Because not only does he have a buyout if they fired him, and they're certainly not going to do that anytime soon, but if Jimbo leaves, most coaches, the university says, okay, fine, we'll protect you. If we fire you, we got to pay you $12 million, $15 million, $20, $25 million. But if you leave us for another job, then we get $12 million, $15, we get a buyout. Jimbo has no buyout.
Mm-mm. No, yeah, he can go to mine. I think that's another reason the LSU thing hasn't necessarily died. Is
right?
Is that,
I get it.
I can walk away at any time, but
not happening.
Shoot, I mean that was an insane contract, and as I mentioned earlier, Jimbo, you can kind of read the writing on the wall. He was going to leave Florida State at some point for some job. And it took that kind of deal to get him to A&M. I mean, that's an A&M has all those. And
he beat Alabama. And he beat Alabama. He is set.
Yeah,
I know he's not going to the Atlanta for the championship game, but you beat Alabama already like that. He can run for mayor. He in some parts of Texas, he could run for governor. Like, it's just a nice, comfortable situation. I don't know why he would walk away from that. LSU's a fantastic job. I just don't think right now it's the job that he would leave A&M for. All right, we keep circling back to that. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Michael, what else you have?
That's it.
That's all five. The Haney Hot Five has been completed.
The Mel Tucker storyline took our last headline.
That was it. Yeah. Look, Michael, breaking news. He's coming up with hot fives. He's going on rock boats.
All the stuff.
He just knocking out one thing after the other. Michael, you have anything you're looking forward to this week? This is not a great slate of games, by the way. Just looking at it, like even the games that look good on paper, if you look at the point spreads, not that tells you everything, but there's some pretty lopsided, even on the marquee games, they're pretty lopsided games. Like even Michigan State, Ohio State, if you look, I think it's like an 18-point spread. Ohio State is just rolling right now. Alabama, Arkansas, that looked like a great game, in September. I don't know about now. So I don't know. Either one of you guys, are you jacked up about any game on the slate this Saturday?
I'm jacked up about Wake Forest and Clemson.
Yeah, that's intriguing.
Now listen, it's at Death Valley.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that doesn't get talked about, because Dabo's been winning national championships and stuff, and this seems like a long time ago, is that one of the first things he did was turn that Wake Forest series, right? You remember Tommy Bowden? Remember Tommy Bowden losing to Wake Forest like three or four times?
Riley Skinner, baby.
Remember him getting fired? You know, Dabo, honestly, I don't think Dabo's ever lost to Wake Forest. I think they lost to Wake Forest when he took over that year as an interim, but Tommy was still coaching. So he hadn't lost to the Demon Deacons. There have been some games where Wake's played them well, but for the most part, he's turned that daggum thing completely around. But this year, Wake is the favorite, and Clemson is depleted with injuries and all that.
And they've had three narrow victories, some really close scares.
Very close.
DC,
can't score.
Louisville. I mean, they've been living on the edge to have that 7-3 record this year for as talented as they are with all the injuries.
But their defense is still good, really good. So they match up strength on strength with Wake. I don't know how great Wake's defense is. So the Tigers' offense, with whatever they've got, has a chance to get going. Like I said, it's at home. It doesn't impact, I don't think, the standings. I don't think, well, if Wake loses to Clemson, no, I think, okay, so Wake loses to Clemson and then Boston College the next week. Clemson could still win the division. It's going to take a lot for that to happen, but, I'm fired up for that game just because of the matchups and to see if maybe we see something that because people can say what they want. Wake Forest going into Clemson and winning is going to – we talked about the committee and could Wake make it or whatever. That's gonna still mean a lot to a potential committee.
I'll tell you one thing, too. Sam Hartman's one of the most underrated players in college football. Kid out of Charlotte. He's a really good quarterback. He's also got two good wide receivers, things you wouldn't like Wake's actually putting guys in the NFL the last few years. And by the way, the guy that's the star of Michigan State this year – was a starting running back for Wake Forest last year. He transferred. Clausen's actually he's finding those diamonds in the rough. And when you talk to him about it, they go through that landscape and they let all the 5 stars get plucked up by your perennial powers. And then they find that 3-star kid that has some type of knock on him and they get him. And that's how they're winning games over there. They don't, when I say developmental program, they don't have the 19-year-old 5-star freshman that just takes the world by storm. Mm-mm. They have the red shirt sophomore who was too small coming out of high school that then blossoms into a really good player. That's been their MO, and it's worked pretty well for them. By the way, I'll just say one other thing on spreads. They already have the Ohio State-Michigan lineup. You guys want to take a guess at what it will be? That's, of course, the following week, high noon, Ohio State at Michigan in Ann Arbor. Haney, you want to take a shot at that one? If you were setting the line at the Michael Haney Casino.
Well, I'll be blunt, gentlemen. I haven't had a chance to watch much of either one, but knowing that they're 2 top 7 teams, and it's in the big house. I would probably put it somewhere around, 6.5 Ohio State.
6.5 Ohio State. JC.
I'm going to go with Ohio State -8.
You guys are both very close. Michael Haney wins the prize. Right now, you can get the Buckeyes -6.
Oh, wow.
-6 right now.
See, that's going to be. See, I think Ohio State's going to go up there and cut them again. I mean, I think it's not going to even. I think it's going to be an 18-point game. That said, guys, Penn State was getting 19 in Columbus a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, that's too many points. And Ohio State won by 3 or something like that. So maybe I'm just basing that on previous years, right?
None of us have any dog in this fight, right? None of us have. I've never pulled for or against Ohio State or Michigan, but just for the rivalry, I'm all in on Michigan. I want to see
Cal. Got to have them win, man. They hadn't won in so long.
It'd be good for college. I keep saying that, I know, and I'm sure somewhere right now there's an Ohio State fan. It ain't good for us. It'd be
Never
good.
listen to this podcast again.
Yeah, screw you, Morgan.
OHIO.
Yeah, I always knew you were a Michigan homer. I love the way I just gave an Ohio State fan a thick Southern accent. But a
lot of them do come down to Myrtle Beach during the summer, so they could have picked it up.
That's true.
Parts of Southern Ohio sound like Kentucky or someplace like that.
I just always
Southern,
when I want to really convey an angry fan, it just comes out better with a Southern accent. It just does. But I think it'd be great for college football if Michigan wins this game and wins the Big Ten and goes to the playoff. Like, that would be a great story because, JC, you and I, what was it, a month and a half ago? What did we talk about? Chaos. Could this be 2007? And I was kind of secretly hoping it would be, just to mix it up a little bit. And I'm looking at these playoff rankings, and yeah, Clemson's down this year. We all know that. But what am I looking at? Georgia, Bama, Ohio State, Oregon. Like, this is not exactly the diversification that I was thinking it could be with the utter chaos, because as the dust settled, we're looking at the same programs again, aren't we? Minus a couple.
Yeah. I mean, and it's in years like this too, it's weird because you've got like the some of the usual suspects, and then you've got off brands. I railed against brands earlier, but you've got all these teams, and then you got Cincinnati and Wake Forest. And you've got Florida giving up 52 points to an FCS
See,
school.
That's the bigger story.
Yeah.
The bigger story this year in college football is the utter disappointment of some brand name programs. Florida, Florida State, Miami, Texas, Southern Cal again. If you want to extend it, UCLA again. I bought into early on the Chip Kelly hype for this would be the year, and then they lay an egg the rest of the year just about. How does Florida look this bad? I mean, in some ways, it almost looked like they quit in the Samford game. I'm trying to think what other just utter disappointment brand name. So, I mean, those would lead the way, I would think. I'm probably leaving somebody out, but that's the hidden gem story, the pain and misery of those fan bases scratching their head and going, how in the hell are we looking this bad with all the resources, with all the recruiting, with all the money, with all the this one, and you're still struggling. It goes to show you that is still possible. We might not have a lot of diversity at the top. It might be the same old song and dance, but anybody can hit Skid Row in college football because we've seen it happen. You name a premier program, and I'll show you a time frame in recent memory where they were not real good. Anyway, all right, we're overtime by a long shot. Michael, great job as always. What exciting, as we live vicariously through you, what exciting adventure do you have planned here?
Well, this week as we head into the holidays, I'm actually off, so I get to relax a little bit. So I'm looking forward to propping my feet up and actually having a chance to watch some of these intriguing matchups. So that's really what I'm looking forward to. And then, of course, next week is family time and Thanksgiving and all that good stuff.
Right.
I actually get a weekend. This is maybe my third or fourth weekend in Nashville since April. So I'm looking forward to it.
Maybe do a little Bed Bath and Beyond, little Home Depot. I don't know if you're going to have time.
I don't know if we'll have time. I really don't. We'll see.
If you could squeeze that in. Great job as always. We look forward to having your presence next week. Okay.
All right, man. Looking forward to it.
All right. JC.
All right.
Always
thanks,
a pleasure.
guys. This was wonderful.
Yeah. We will do it again next week. For Michael Haney, JC Shurburtt, Mike Morgan saying so long for now. We'll see you next time on JC and Morgan.